The air shimmered with heat as the twin suns of Viridian Prime cast an emerald glow over the jungle canopy. Captain Elias Vance crouched low behind the jagged stump of a fallen tree, his pulse steady, his grip firm on the modified plasma rifle. Around him, his team waited, silent as the predators that prowled these alien woods. Above, the sky roared with the sound of descending Concordium drop ships, their hulls gleaming like the talons of some vast, merciless predator. Vance tapped the side of his helmet, activating the comms. "Status check," he whispered. "North sector secured," came Lieutenant Drax's voice, clipped but calm. "Traps are set." "East is ready," chimed in Corporal Vega, her tone laced with tension. Vance glanced at Sergeant Kane, who crouched nearby. Kane nodded once, his massive frame coiled like a spring. The man didn't need words. His readiness was etched into every line of his scarred face. "Hold positions," Vance ordered. His voice carried the weight of experience, tempered by the grim knowledge of what was coming. "Wait for my signal." The jungle around them seemed alive, its bioluminescent plants pulsing faintly in the dim light. In the distance, a guttural roar echoed, a reminder that this moon wasn't just a battleground, it was a death trap for the unwary. That was the plan. Vance checked his chronometer. 3 minutes until the first wave of Concordium soldiers hit the ground. He inhaled deeply, letting the humid, metallic air fill his lungs. This was humanity's moment, the culmination of months of skirmishes, losses, and relentless adaptation. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to prove they belonged among the stars. A sharp beep on his visor signaled incoming movement. The Concordium drop ships had breached the atmosphere, their silhouettes visible through gaps in the canopy. "Eyes sharp," Vance murmured. The first drop ship landed with a deafening hiss, its ramp lowering to unleash a squad of heavily armored alien soldiers. The Concordium, towering and insected, moved with a mechanical precision that betrayed their overconfidence. They didn't bother scanning the terrain, they thought humanity was beneath them. Big mistake. Vance's finger hovered over the detonator in his hand. He waited, counting each alien step as they advanced into the jungle, their weapons humming with latent energy. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. Finally, the lead soldier stepped onto the disguised trigger plate. Vance pressed the detonator. The ground erupted in a blaze of fire and shrapnel as buried explosives tore through the Concordium ranks. Alien screams filled the air, cut short as jagged fragments pierced armor and flesh. The survivors scrambled for cover, but there was none to be found. The humans had ensured that. "Engage!" Vance barked. His team sprang into action. Plasma bolts lit up the jungle, streaking through the dense undergrowth as the humans fired from concealed positions. The Concordium soldiers, disoriented and underestimating their opponents, fell one by one. Kane's heavy machine gun roared to life, mowing down an entire squad that had attempted to flank them. Vega took out a drone with a well-placed shot, its wreckage crashing into a tree and scattering sparks. "Watch your left!" Drax called out as a Concordium soldier leveled its weapon at Vance. Vance spun, firing a quick burst that struck the alien in the chest. It collapsed in a heap, its chitinous armor smoking. The fight was brutal and chaotic, but it was clear who had the upper hand. The jungle itself seemed to fight alongside the humans. Branches snapped underfoot, exposing traps, and venomous plants lashed out at the invaders. Within minutes, the first wave of Concordium troops was annihilated. "Status?" Vance demanded, his voice sharp. "All clear," Kane rumbled. "Minimal injuries," Vega added. Vance allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. "Good work. Regroup at Point Delta." As the team moved through the jungle, gathering at their rendezvous point, Vance's thoughts turned to the larger battle ahead. This was only the beginning. The Concordium would adapt, just as humanity had. The real challenge was yet to come. His comms crackled with static before a voice broke through. It was a Concordium officer, speaking in their harsh, guttural tongue. Vance's helmet translated the words automatically. "Resistance is futile, humans. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift." Vega snorted. They're really leaning into the villain cliches, huh? Let them talk, Kane said, his tone grim. We'll respond the way we always do. The sound of approaching dropships cut off the banter. Vance motioned for silence, his hand raised in a signal to spread out. This time, the Concordium landed further out, learning from their mistake. Vance watched through his scope as a larger, more heavily armed contingent disembarked. These soldiers moved with more caution, scanning the jungle for threats. Vance keyed his comms. We stick to the plan. Hit hard, then fall back. Let the jungle do the rest. As the second wave advanced, Vance felt a flicker of unease. Something was different this time. The Concordium soldiers moved in tighter formations, their weapons sweeping systematically through the undergrowth. Captain! Drax's voice came through the comms, low and urgent. I'm picking up heat signatures, something big. Before Vance could respond, the jungle trembled. A massive shape burst through the trees, its scaled hide gleaming in the dim light. It was a native predator, a towering, six-legged beast with glowing eyes and jaws that could crush steel. The Concordium soldiers faltered, their formation breaking as they turned their weapons on the creature. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, but the beast charged, unstoppable. Vance seized the opportunity. Now! Hit them while they're distracted! His team opened fire, striking with lethal precision. The Concordium forces, caught between human ingenuity and the moon's wrath, stood no chance. As the last alien fell, the jungle grew eerily quiet. The predator, now wounded, slunk back into the shadows, leaving behind only the chaos it had sown. Vance wiped sweat from his brow, his mind racing. The battle was theirs for now. But as he looked up at the sky, where more Concordium ships loomed, he knew the fight was far from over. This is just the start, he said quietly. And he was right. The alien moon was alive with tension, its bioluminescent plants casting ghostly light over the battered terrain. Captain Elias Vance led his team deeper into the jungle, each step measured, every breath drawn with care. Behind them, the sounds of distant explosions and the hiss of Concordium plasma fire echoed, a brutal reminder that this battle was far from over. Elias held up a clenched fist, signaling the team to halt. The group froze, their camouflaged armor blending with the vibrant flora. He scanned the area, his rifle raised, his eyes sharp behind the polarized visor of his helmet. Captain! Corporal Vega whispered, crouched behind a cluster of glowing ferns. Movement northeast. 3 heat signatures. Elias nodded. Drax, take Vega and flank left. Kane, you're with me. Keep it quiet until I give the signal. The team moved like shadows, silent and deliberate. As Elias advanced with Sergeant Kane, the humid air pressed against his skin, his senses alert to every rustle of leaves and faint chirp of alien insects. The Concordium soldiers were close, too close. They crept to the edge of a clearing where 3 alien soldiers scanned the jungle with their weapons drawn, their multi-limbed forms casting eerie silhouettes under the moon's glow. Concordium drones hovered nearby, their red optics flickering as they searched for heat traces. Patience, Elias whispered, crouching low. Kane grunted in acknowledgement, his massive frame barely concealed by the undergrowth. Elias studied the scene, his mind calculating angles, distances, and timing. He pulled a signal flare from his belt and handed it to Kane. On my mark, fire it south, Elias said. Let's give them something to chase. Kane smirked, his weathered face visible behind his visor. They won't know what hit them. Elias raised his hand, fingers splayed, then brought it down in a sharp motion. The flare shot into the sky, a streak of red light cutting through the dark canopy. Instantly, the Concordium soldiers turned, their heads snapping toward the distraction. The drones followed, whirring as they raced after the false target. No! Elias hissed. He and Kane sprang from cover, their rifles firing in controlled bursts. Plasma bolts struck 2 of the aliens, their armored bodies collapsing in lifeless heaps. The third whirled around, raising its weapon, but Kane closed the distance with terrifying speed. The massive sergeant swung the butt of his rifle into the alien's chest, sending it sprawling into the dirt. Clear, Elias said, lowering his weapon. Not bad for a warm-up, Kane muttered, hauling the unconscious alien upright. Elias activated his comms. Drax, Vega report. All clear on our end, Drax replied. No casualties. We've set charges along the eastern ridge, just as planned. Good, Elias said. Regroup at Waypoint Delta. We're moving to Phase 2. The team rendezvoused at a narrow ravine, its walls carved by centuries of acidic rainfall. The sound of rushing water masked their movements as they reviewed the next stage of the plan. Elias spread a holographic map on the ground, the moon's terrain rendered in flickering blue light. He pointed to a dense patch of jungle marked with hazard warnings. This is the choke point, he said. We'll funnel the Concordium forces through here and let the environment do most of the work. Traps, ambushes, anything we can use to slow them down. What about the predators? Vega asked, her tone uneasy. That thing from earlier nearly wiped out a whole squad. That's the idea, Elias said. We don't have the firepower to take on their main force directly, but the jungle does. We just need to guide them into its jaws. Drax frowned. And if we end up as collateral damage? Elias's expression hardened. Then we fail. Stay sharp, stick to the plan, and don't take unnecessary risks. We survive by being smarter, not stronger. Kane chuckled darkly. Works for me. Let the jungle eat them alive. By nightfall, the traps were set. Explosive charges lined the ravine's edges, their triggers hidden beneath layers of moss and leaves. In the trees above, Vega and Drax rigged crude but effective snares, using vines and spikes fashioned from salvaged Concordium gear. Elias crouched at the base of the ravine, his helmet's visor glowing faintly as he monitored the enemy's movements. The Concordium troops were advancing in staggered columns, their searchlights slicing through the darkness. They're splitting up, Elias muttered into the comms. Good. Smaller groups are easier to pick off. Vega's voice crackled through his earpiece. Captain, I've got eyes on their lead officer. Looks like they're scanning for heat signatures. Keep out of sight, Elias warned. Wait for my signal. The lead column entered the ravine, their steps cautious but determined. Elias watched as one of the soldiers stepped onto a concealed pressure plate. The explosion was instantaneous. A deafening roar echoed through the jungle as the charge detonated, sending shrapnel and debris flying in all directions. Concordium soldiers scattered, their formation broken. Engage! Elias ordered. Plasma fire erupted from the humans' positions, precise and unrelenting. The Concordium forces returned fire, but their panic made them sloppy. Above, Vega triggered one of the snares, sending a cluster of spikes hurtling downward. The aliens beneath it didn't stand a chance. The jungle itself seemed to come alive as the battle raged. Vines snapped, releasing thorn pods that lashed out at anything nearby. Predators, drawn by the noise and the scent of blood, slithered through the undergrowth, their glowing eyes reflecting the chaos. Elias fired in short bursts, picking off stragglers while directing his team's movements. Kane, take the north flank! Drax, cover our retreat path! The Concordium officer barked commands in their guttural tongue, rallying his troops. Elias narrowed his eyes, watching as the officer moved toward a fallen soldier. Vega, Elias said. Can you hit the officer? Already on it, she replied. A plasma bolt lanced through the air, striking the officer squarely in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, his orders silenced. Good shot, Elias said. Thanks, Captain. The remaining Concordium troops faltered, their morale shattered. One by one, they fell to human ingenuity and the moon's unrelenting wrath. When the jungle finally fell silent, Elias called for a regroup. His team gathered in the clearing, their armor scuffed and their faces weary but resolute. We did it, Vega said, her voice tinged with disbelief. For now, Elias replied. He glanced at the sky, where more Concordium ships loomed on the horizon. This was just a skirmish. The real battle's still ahead. As his team prepared to move out, Elias's gaze lingered on the jungle around them. The moon had become their greatest ally, its dangers a weapon in their hands. But it was a double-edged sword, one misstep, and it could just as easily turn against them. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. Let's keep moving. We're not done yet. The jungle pulsed with a strange, eerie silence as Captain Elias Vance led his team deeper into its heart. The bioluminescent plants cast a faint, greenish glow, but the oppressive darkness between the trees seemed almost alive, pressing in on them like a predator waiting to strike. Sweat slicked Elias's brow beneath his helmet, and every step forward felt heavier, as though the moon itself resisted their presence. Captain! Vega whispered from behind him, her voice barely audible over the faint hum of insects. Sensors are picking up heavy movement. Too far to confirm, but it's big. Elias nodded, not breaking stride. Stay sharp. Whatever it is, let it work for us, not against us. The team moved in a tight formation, their weapons raised, their eyes scanning every shadow. The Concordium forces weren't far behind. The alien soldiers had regrouped, more cautious and calculating now, but their relentless pursuit made one thing clear: they wouldn't stop until every human on Viridian Prime was dead. As they crested a ridge, the jungle opened into a sprawling basin below. Thick, gnarled trees surrounded a massive sinkhole, its depths shrouded in mist. The faint hum of Concordium drones echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Elias crouched and motioned for the others to do the same. He scanned the terrain, his visor highlighting key points of interest. The basin was littered with jagged rocks, thorn plants, and pools of viscous, glowing liquid, likely acidic, judging by the scorched ground around them. A natural death trap. Perfect. This is where we make our stand, Elias said, his voice low but firm. Kane peered over the ridge, his expression grim. If they corner us down there, it'll be hard to get out. Elias smirked. Then we make sure they don't walk away either. Vega leaned closer, her tone skeptical. What's the plan, Captain? We can't keep running and fighting like this forever. We don't have to, Elias said, tapping the side of his helmet to bring up a holographic map. We've been leading them right where we want them. This basin is the final piece of the puzzle. We lure them in, trap them, and end it. Drax frowned. And if reinforcements arrive before we finish the job? Elias met his gaze, unflinching. Then we make it count. We weren't sent here to run. We were sent here to win. The team fell silent, the weight of the moment settling over them like a heavy shroud. Then Kane cracked his knuckles, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Let's do it. The team worked quickly, setting traps and positioning themselves strategically around the basin. Vega rigged proximity mines along the narrow paths leading in, while Drax concealed remote explosives near the sinkhole's edge. Kane, ever the bruiser, fortified their fallback position with makeshift barricades, using fallen branches and debris. As Elias secured a tripwire near one of the glowing pools, his comms crackled to life. The voice on the other end was distorted, guttural, and unmistakably Concordium. Humans, the alien officer growled. Your resistance is futile. Surrender, and your deaths will be merciful. Elias chuckled dryly, responding in a calm, measured tone. You've got it backward. You're walking into our trap. Turn back while you can. There was a pause, followed by a harsh, grating laugh. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Your defiance is meaningless. Then come find out, Elias replied, cutting the channel. He turned to the team, his expression hardened. Get ready. They're coming. The first wave of Concordium troops entered the basin cautiously, their movements deliberate. The drones led the way, scanning for traps, but the humans had been meticulous. Elias watched from his vantage point as the lead drone crossed the tripwire, triggering an explosion that tore it apart and sent shrapnel into the soldiers behind it. Engage! Elias ordered, and his team opened fire. The jungle erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, lighting up the darkness as the humans fought with precision and ferocity. The Concordium soldiers retaliated, their energy weapons carving glowing arcs into the night, but the humans had the high ground and the element of surprise. Kane's heavy machine gun roared, cutting down a cluster of alien soldiers attempting to flank them. Drax detonated a charge, collapsing part of the ridge and burying another group in rubble. Vega's sniper rifle picked off targets with surgical accuracy, her calm demeanor belying the chaos around her. Elias fired in controlled bursts, his mind racing as he assessed the battlefield. The Concordium forces were relentless, but their coordination faltered as they were funneled deeper into the basin. The traps were doing their job, but it wasn't enough. More drop ships were visible in the distance, their thrusters glowing like angry eyes. "They're bringing reinforcements," Vega called out, her voice strained. "Hold your ground," Elias shouted back. "We're not done yet." The jungle itself seemed to rebel against the invaders. Predators, drawn by the noise and scent of blood, emerged from the shadows. A massive, six-legged creature charged into the fray, its jaws snapping around a Concordium soldier and flinging it aside like a ragdoll. The aliens turned their weapons on the beast, but their distraction cost them dearly as the humans pressed the attack. Elias used the chaos to his advantage, signaling his team to reposition. They moved like ghosts, striking from new angles and keeping the Concordium forces off balance. But the tide was turning. For every alien that fell, two more seemed to take its place. "Captain, we're getting overrun!" Drax shouted, his voice tight with urgency. Elias glanced at the sinkhole. The explosives were still in place, untouched. He made a split-second decision. "Fall back to the ridge. Now!" The team retreated under covering fire, their movements swift and coordinated. As the Concordium soldiers pursued, Elias waited until they were clustered near the sinkhole. Then he pressed the detonator. The ground shook as the charges went off, collapsing the edge of the sinkhole and sending dozens of aliens plummeting into its depths. A plume of smoke and debris rose into the air, blotting out the faint light of the moons. Elias's team regrouped at the ridge, their breaths heavy but their spirits unbroken. The Concordium forces had been decimated, but the cost had been high. Supplies were running low, and reinforcements were still on their way. Vega broke the silence. "That bought us time, but it's not over." Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "No, it's not. But we showed them what humanity can do. They'll think twice before underestimating us again." As the jungle settled into uneasy quiet, Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. The battle wasn't over, but he knew one thing for certain: humanity would fight until its last breath.